Lesson 11.8, we're going to use the product rule and quotient rule to multiply and divide radical expressions. So today we're going to do the multiplication part of it, and tomorrow we'll be doing the dividing part of it. And with the multiplication part of it, sometimes it's easier to simplify before we multiply, and sometimes it's easier to multiply first and then simplify. Now, either way, you should get your answer correct, but sometimes you just kind of got to look at it and say, which way would be better? So in letter A here, it says the square root of 8 times the square root of 6. And I could simplify the square root of 8, and that would be okay to do that. So sometimes you just need to look at it and say, okay, which way am I going to go about it? In this case, yes, I can simplify the square root of 8, but I'm going to have to simplify after I multiply anyways, so it's just going to be better to do the multiplication. And so here we're using the product rule, so I'm just going to multiply 8 and 6 together, and that stays under the radical. So what is 6 times 8? Okay. So we have the square root of 48. So now we have to find the largest square that goes into 48 so that we can simplify that. And that is okay. So you need to make sure sometimes that you look at your chart, okay, to help you out. And in this case, it is 16 and 3. Okay, all right. Now, we could use 12 and 4, but then we would have to continue to simplify again because it wouldn't be done. All right. Okay. So then this is 4 square roots of 3 because the square root of 16 is 4. Okay. All right. Letter B. What does it mean when something's squared?
Itself times itself.
Okay, multiplied by itself. Right? So this is 2 square roots of 5 times 2 square roots of 5. Now sometimes this provides people with a little bit of a challenge. Okay. But the one thing you need to remember is I can multiply things on the outside of the parentheses, or on the outside of the radical, and I can multiply things under the radical, but I can't go the other way. Okay? I can't multiply the 2 on the outside times the 5 on the inside. It doesn't work that way. Okay? So one thing you might want to do in this case is to rewrite it so that the numbers outside of the radical are together and the numbers inside the radical are together. Well, you don't have to, but for some of you it might help. Okay. All right. So 2 times 2 is 4. And what's the square root of 5 times the square root of 5? Okay, the square root of 25, which is 5. All right. So this is times 5. So my answer is 20. Now the other thing you can think of this another way. Okay? Yes, Austin.
Square root of 5.
Isn't it because the square roots cancel each other out?
Well, that's where I'm going to go right here. Okay, for just a second. Okay. Now, let's look at it this way then before I answer that question completely. Okay. All right. This also means that I have 2 squared and the square root of 5 squared. Okay. What happens when you square a square root? Okay, they undo each other, right? Okay. And so this would be 4 times 5 also. Okay. So you can think of it either way. But remember, when I have something times itself, it's being squared, and so the square root and the squared undo each other. Okay, so I just end up with that number. Yep. Right. Okay, so I want you to do letter C. All right, let's see how you did then. So I'm going to use the product property for radicals. Gives me the square root of 36y squared. 3 times 12 is 36, and y times y. The square root of 36 is? And the square root of y squared is y. So 6y is your answer then. Okay? All right. Okay, a little distributive property. And once again, sometimes it's easier to simplify before you do anything else, but you don't have to necessarily. Okay? And so here we have square root of 3 times the quantity 7 minus the square root of 8. So I could simplify the square root of 8 first, but you don't have to. Now, if either one of these things is a perfect square, okay, then I would always simplify that first. Okay? If they give you a perfect square there, boy, get rid of that radical right away. Okay? So when I distribute, we'll multiply the square root of 3 times 7 and the square root of 3 times the square root of 8. So if we're multiplying a radical by a constant, then we just write the constant in front and the radical after that. So this is 7 square roots of 3. Okay. Do not put them together as far as they don't both go under the radical because the 7 is not under the radical. Because if this 7 was under a radical, it would mean 49, right? Okay. Because the 7 squared. Okay. And then we get minus the square root of, and we can multiply the 3 and the 8 together now because they're both under the radical. And we get square root of 24. And you've got to remember to, if you can simplify, you need to do it. Is there a square that goes into 24? Okay, 4 does. So we've got 7 square roots of 3 minus 2 square roots of 6, right? Okay, everybody okay with that? Okay, 4 times 6 is 24, so square root of 4 is 2. All right, and if you want to, you could always write it along out the outside or along the side, and so that you see it. Okay. All right, let's look at another one using the distributive property. Square root of 2 times the square root of 8 plus the square root of 18. All right, so why don't you do that one? Okay? All right, so we distribute square root of 16. Square root of 36, and 4 plus 6 is 10. Okay? All right. Good work. All right, last one for today now. All right, how many of you know how to FOIL? I think all of you know how to FOIL. Okay? Now, so we are actually going to use FOIL with radicals. But now, I need to share with you something. And this is a warning for you, okay? Because what will happen is this, with hopefully, it does happen, unfortunately, is that now we do a problem like this, and some of you will go back here to letter B and write it out like 2 squared is 5, 2 squared is 5, and then you'll FOIL it. Okay? All right? It happens. Almost every class I have that does this, we do that, okay? So just remember, there is a difference. This says multiply here. All right? Over here, we have two totally different things, so be careful. All right? Now, so since we all know how to FOIL, we'll just go right into that then. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times square root of 8 is 3 square roots of 8. Right? FO. First outer inner, negative 2 square roots of 8. And last, negative square root of 64. 8 times 8 is 64. All right. So I simplify, we get 6. 3 square roots of 8 minus 2 square roots of 8 is, okay, 1 square root of 8. And then minus 8. So I'm going to go horizontally here. Equals 6 minus 8 is? Negative 2. All right. Can I simplify the square root of 8? Okay. Some of these you should just be able to snap them off in your head really quick. Okay. This should be one of them that you should get used to, that this one, okay, it's 2 square roots of 2. All right. All right. 4 times 2 is 8. Square root of 4 is 2. So this is plus 2 square roots of 2. And one final thing, you should always write it in that order, okay? If you have a number without a radical and a number with a radical, the part with the radical always goes last, okay? Just like they wrote it in the problem, right? The number with the radical always goes last. All right, when things are squared, it means what? Okay, multiplied by itself. So I need to write out here 4 plus the square root of 3. So I know that it's multiplied by itself. Do our FOIL. Get 16 plus 4 square root of 3. All right, when I multiply 4 times both of them. And then when I multiply the square root of 3 times both of them, I get 4 square roots of 3 and the square root of 9. And if you can do it and just write 3 there instead of the square root of 9, then go ahead. All right? Because either way, it should make sense to you. If I multiply the square root of something by itself, I get that thing. Okay? So I don't need to put that there. I can just put 3 there. So 16 plus 3 is 19 plus 8 square roots of 3. All right. You guys good with that then? Okay. I figured you would be.